this demo is about opening Visual Studio for the first time, or Visual Basic. Sometimes you're going to hear me refer to it as Visual Studio, sometimes Visual Basic. Don't get yourself confused by that. The real difference here is that this whole environment is kind of Visual Studio, but depending on what you download here, I'm going to my Start button over here. Depending on how your machine is set up, where you go with here. Notice I have a folder here on my Start button that says Microsoft Visual Studio 2010 Express. And inside of there, I've got Visual Basic, C#, C++, all those different programming languages that I can use in Visual Studio. So the environment is Visual Studio. The programming language we're using inside of there is Visual Basic. So like I said, depending on how your machine's set up, you might be going to the Start button, navigating your way down to this stuff to open Visual Basic. Maybe you might be able to put a shortcut icon yourself for this, or pin it to your taskbar so it's right there for easing opening. However your computer setup is, I don't know, but that's, if you're starting a whole new project, that's a way to open Visual Studio and start a brand new project. So I've done that. I'm at the screen here. This is basically what's called the start page or start screen in Visual Studio. One thing I want to point out to you here is this little window right here with all the getting started, latest news, welcome, all that stuff. There are a bunch of resources available right in here that you can utilize. If you get through the stuff that I post up there quicker than other people, and you have time in there, that doesn't mean the class is necessarily a study hall. There are a bunch of resources here where you can go explore further, learn some things on your own, and when we start getting into creating some programs, you're going to turn in your first program by the end of this week. Every program you turn into me, I'm going to have some basic things I want you to put in there, but I'm also going to ask you to add something that's completely your own idea. Okay, so that's where learning some other things might be helpful to you. Just to click into one of these real quick, what I want to show you is the fact that this is going to open up its own little browser inside of here. It's not a very good web browser, so when you're going to this stuff, what you might actually want to do is just take these URLs that are in here and copy and paste them into your web browser, and then you got a whole full-fledged web browser instead of just this little browser that's embedded into Visual Studio here. Okay, but there's tons of stuff there. Feel free, if you're caught up on the lessons, to go in there and learn as much as you can, because I could have 8 semesters of Visual Basic class and we still wouldn't get to everything that you could do or might be important. Okay, so if when I'm at this point and I want to open a new project, I can just click New Project here. Now here again, depending on what your setup is like. On my machine, I can go to recent projects just like I can go to recent documents and Word and all that stuff and open up some of this. I know on my students' machines, they really can't do that because they're expected to save all their stuff to a server or a flash drive for themselves, so they don't have this capability of recent projects. You might in your situation, I don't know. So that depends on how your school has the saving of files and folders set up for you. Okay, but if I go to New Project here, I just want to show you a couple of things real quickly here. One thing about this is there are different types of programs we can create. A console program would just be a program that looks like a little command line program. It's only text based, that kind of thing. But we're going to make Windows Forms applications, so they're normal Windows looking kind of application that you would see for any program that opens on the desktop. So that's what we're going to focus on really for most of this class. One thing about Visual Studio here is I name my project before I ever even save it the first time. So I don't have any of these untitled documents or any of that stuff laying around. And it's important to figure this out, what you want to name something before you even start, because as I'm going to show you here in a second, a Visual Basic project is not just one file like a Word file. It's a bunch of folders and files all over the place. So it's not like if I goof up the naming of this that I can just go rename the file. if it's tons of files and it's a big, huge mess if you don't name it right in the first place. So what I'm going to ask you to do in this class is name all your projects with your last name, and then whatever, and then a descriptive name of the project. So let's just say this was my first project or something like that. Don't have to put any spaces in there. It helps if you capitalize each word. But make sure your last name's in there so I know who it's coming from and whose it is, and a descriptive name in there will also help us. When I click OK here, it's going to create the IDE, Integrated Development Environment, okay? And so what I have here is it's made the first window for my project right here, okay? One thing while I'm talking about it, and I was just talking about it, was a project folder, right? So what I want to, let's do this real quick since I was just talking about that. Bring in here, so here is, let's say here's my first project, the folder here. Just to kind of give you an idea, this is not just one little single file, right? If I open this folder, here we go. I've got folders and another file right here. Okay, I can go down further, another bunch of folders and another file right there. Keep going, there's more folders and files, more files and folders. So as you can see, a project like this is very complex. It has lots of folders and files to it. It's going to be important to keep all these things organized, okay? Now, once I've already created this project and I want to open it a second time, if you're in the situation where you can't go to that open recent projects, this right here, the .sln file, is the file that you can double click and it will open your whole project. Now that doesn't mean you have to have this whole folder of stuff. You got to have this whole folder of stuff right here for my project to be able to open and run, but this is the file that will initiate that. Okay, I've had people, they think they'll just move this file somewhere and they're going to open it and do something with their project, but you really can't. Okay, you got to have the whole folder of stuff. All right. But so far in this video, we just learned real quickly how we can open a project, open Visual Studio from our Start button or a shortcut, or open a project with this SLN file for one we've already started.